Hey there, welcome to Synth Seeker. My name is Luke. In today's production log, we are going to look at and disassemble the project Slingshot at Cas X-1, Cassiopeia X-1. This is a song that I made that came out of the Sinfera Discord server has a sort of collaborative community album project they're working on called Assemblage. And I started making a track to submit to assemblage. And as the track started progressing, I started having ideas for supplemental things I want to do with that music. And the licensing for the assemblage collaborative thing is very open. And on this, I asked them, hey, what's the deal with exclusivity? And it's real open and with an option that it may evolve into something more later. They're keeping their options open, and that's fine. And they're not putting any restrictions on us. But essentially, what happened was, it's my baby, right? And so I'm like, I had submitted, an earlier version of this for that, but I then kept building on it, and so I ended up pulling the track out of the collaborative effort, and they were super nice about it. Everything's fine. We're all friends still. But it snowballed into this project. If you're here from the actual video that was released with the sort of storyline in it and the artwork and imagery and stuff like that, it's way more than just a track at this point, and it's really in line with what I like to do, which is story music, right? I like Berlin School, I like prog rock, I like synthwave, some ambient, but I like music that tells a story. That's sort of the point of Synth Seeker, finding, telling musical stories with synthesizers, software, hardware, it doesn't matter. So, by the way, this is going to be a long video. I'm going to be real talky, and we're going to break down every little tiny minutia piece of this thing. But, so the upshot is, I pulled that, I kept developing it, started exploring some tools to help me sort of do the video production a bit more. And so we're going to talk about the music production here today through the majority of this video. I'm going to touch on some of the video production stuff at the end, which is something new. I generally don't do stuff like that, but people want to know, how did you make that video? And I'll show you. It wasn't hard, and it was cheap, because this is not a $1,000 or $10,000 or $100,000 production. I spent about $100 making this track and making the video, right? And most of that was investment in tools to help me build this stuff. Anyway, so let's get started. All right, this is the project. And there's two main groups. There's everything that isn't the voices, right? There's two versions of the song out there if you go on Bandcamp. There's one with the story dialogue in it, and there's one without the story dialogue. So basically, I've got two groupings. I've got voices and not voices, okay? So we've got voices. We'll get to that after we talk about the music, but this is all the musical content, okay? And I am working in Ableton because that is my DAW of choice. It does not matter. Everything I'm going to show you here, you could do all of this in any piece of software as far as music production is concerned. You could even do it in hardware with like a Tascam recorder or something like that, a multi-track recorder of some kind. This is all going to apply, okay? Okay, so let's drill into this. I'm just gonna play some of the song. We'll talk about the instruments as they come in. I'll disassemble each one, show you what's happening. All of this production for this song is completely in the box. Okay, I've got a big collection of hardware synths, but I didn't use any of them for this, though I could have, and so can you. All right, but we'll get into sound design, presets. What did we tweak? How did we layer stuff together? So let's get started. So we initially start with this pad here. So. So this is soloed. Let's look at this. All right, so we've got our spacey pad going on here. This is a soft pad, right? It comes in slowly, right? What instrument is this? Okay, this is Omnisphere. Okay, pull this up. Oh, come on, Omnisphere, you can do it. Anyway, so it's literally a preset out of the Omnisphere library. And I didn't tweak it at all. The only processing I did is I've got a utility plugin on the end. Here's some comedy, okay? So I've got two utility plugins in series. One's bumping by 3 decibels, one's pulling back by 6 decibels. I used to have a bunch of experimental things in here. I had some processing in there, but I got the level set at the, to a point where I liked it, and then I ended up removing those things. And I just didn't go clean this up, right? I didn't do the math to figure out what it should be and pull out one of these. It doesn't matter. But when we're working in this domain, however many times oversampled 24 or 32-bit, it's irrelevant, right? Especially on this machine is like overpowered, so I'm not pushing it at all. But that's it. So Nebula is this patch that gets used, comes in periodically. It generally plays the same pattern harmonically. The only variation is in the intro and the outro. Okay, so we've got that as sort of our first layer. And then what happens on top of that is this soft lead. And I'll keep them both playing at the same time here. So if we go back, the soft lead comes in. I'll jump to the patch of what this is in a second. Right, so this is your CS80 style Vangelis. This is a preset, right? But it is also iconically an instrument of Berlin School ambient synthesizer music, right? There's nothing wrong with using presets, right? Especially in the case where you've got a classic instrument. If you're writing classical music, you're writing film scores, you're using presets all the time because a violin library, the orchestral libraries, if you're going to pull a French horn in, something like that, those are known voices, right? Those are known instrumentation, and we want to use them. They're used, and because they are beautiful and classic. And I would say that this particular patch, this CS80 sort of soft horn swell, so horn string swell, is a known voice, right? If you want to do this style of music, you're going to use this sound. Do you have to use it as it is? Can you tweak it? Of course you can. In fact, what did I do to it? So I did some drastic EQ. It's doing a high voice, so I'm pulling the low end out, bumping it at the top. I compress it a bit. I run it through a Roland Dimension D chorus because I like the way that the Dimension D spreads things out. Utility plugin, and then it goes. And this is our soft lead that's heard throughout the piece. All right. Again, this is Omnisphere. Let's see. This is called the Deckard Swell, literally Blade Runner reference, right? Or Deckard's Dream from the hardware. I don't know if they sampled the hardware or something, or if this is actually synth-based. Nord lead saw. Right, so this is another Omnisphere. What you're going to see a lot of today is you're going to see a lot of Native Instruments complete stuff. You're going to see a lot of Omnisphere. You're going to see a lot of Arturia V collection stuff, right? Key Labs, things like that. Analog Lab. So that's what this voice is, right? So between these two Omnisphere voices, you basically have got this. At this point, you've got, a large chunk of space music going on. Now, compositionally, this intro, the entire piece is in B flat minor, and this is just a walk down of B flat minor, which sets the tone, which sort of sets the tone of the piece. It's sort of lamenting, kind of not sad, but dark. We're in outer space, right? So that's our first two voices. So 2 Omnisphere voices, okay? Let's come back. What comes in then? At that point, we've got what's coming in there. I'll just keep adding things as we go. Oh, we're right here. And then this voice coming in is a pluck. All right, so what are we looking at here? All right, so let's disassemble this. What are we looking at? So what I'm calling Pluck 1 is a grouped track. It's 2 tracks. It's an upper and lower. It's just the same track duplicated. And one of them is an octave lower than the other one, right? So, or actually pitched up. The upper is pitched up an octave. So I'm just going to focus on upper. Throughout the entire piece, they basically play in unison, except for this little piece at the very beginning where only the upper piece plays. Okay, so let's look at the patch. All right, so this is an Analog Lab patch, right? So this is from Arturia V collection. And what is this? This is looks like it's the Moog modular. What's the name of this? Pulse Width Re1. I didn't make this. It's a preset that I pulled up that I like the sound of. Let's see. Right, so from a Berlin School perspective, this is a pluck. Right, when you get in the upper ranges, it gets a little metallic. And when the lower ranges, I'm not using it as a bass, it's really a mid and upper. All right. And what is it? It's the Moog modular out of the analog, the Arturia V collection, right? And does it have any inbuilt effects that it's running? I think the delay may be inbuilt, but I put it out here. So we're taking that Moog modular from the Arturia V collection. We're running it through Native Instruments phases. It's a really nice phaser that's available from Native Instruments. Going to a little channel EQ to put a little sparkle up there. We're running it through the Ableton stock echo, which is basically their idea on a Roland Space Echo. And then that's it. And that's what this little bit is. Let's see. Let's loop this right here. And I've got it running as an upper and a lower. Let's hear it. We'll look at both of them. Right, it's just the same notes, an octave apart. Now let's talk about the actual notes here. All right, so what are we looking at? Scale is B flat minor. We're in scale mode. Okay, so our B flat minor scale looks like. Let me play it up higher. Okay, so that's the tone, that's the mood, the feel that we're going for, right? And this is sort of the opposite of what I've done in a lot of my Berlin School videos. Instead of doing simple figures in eighth notes, what this is I actually started with just the root. So let's just look at the upper voice here. So this pattern is outside the norm for what I advocate in my sort of Berlin School videos. A lot of times I'll say use really simple figures, do eighth notes with a dotted eighth delay. This sort of breaks that mold a bit. This is a 16th note pattern. It's 4 bars long. The way I built this, though, is I started with just roots, like mostly. There we go. I started with roots. So it's just... Sorry, let me turn off the other voices. There we go. Turn on the metronome. Right, so it's just a root pattern, and it's syncopated. And then basically I put in that, and then I put in some octaves, right? So the octaves would be these ones. All right, this is how I built this pattern. I said it's going to be 4 bars long. I'm in B flat minor, so I'm going to use the root as sort of this home base. And then I'm going to put in some variations. And I just painted in little patterns, right? Then between the octaves, I added these notes. I still have that dotted eighth note delay running. And then we just sort of kept elaborating, started putting some higher runs in. Just put them all in here. And what I did really is, when you're doing it this way and you're using 16th notes or any sort of interval time metric, you can use those root notes to hold you in a sort of emotional place and use the high end to write little melodies, little micro melodies. So you'll hear these little runs, do-do-do. Right, and this final note here is like the sort of signature of the pattern, of the 4-bar pattern. It's sort of a closing. And again, in this case, I have an upper and lower, so there's some doubling going on there. But that combined with our phaser and our delay gives us that Berlin School feel, right? Our arpeggiation. So there's that one. That's from Arturia, native virtual collection. All right, let's keep going. I got a lot of instruments to get through. Let's see, what's this next one? So I build things in layers, okay? So as far as plucks are concerned, we've got the pluck 1 that we just heard, right? Then we've got pluck 2, we've got a thing called Skitter Pad, and then we've got this thing I called Chaos Twins. All right, these are all of the arpeggiation. Now, you can do arpeggiation in a couple different ways. You can write those figures yourself, or you could use an arpeggiator, and I've split it. Okay, pluck 1 and pluck 2 are patterns that I wrote myself, and then the third and fourth are actually there's an arpeggiator running on the synth, and I'm just playing certain notes. So let's look at pluck 2. Okay, this is another example of arpeggiation locally. All right, and in this case, so pluck 2 is a this actually I wrote an 8-bar pattern, and then I ended up chopping it up and using sections of it in different areas, right? So here's a 4-bar section of that. Now the grid is 16th notes, but this is going to be a more classic Berlin School 8th note arpeggiation with dotted 8th delays, right? If I turn the grid down, right, you'll see everything is falling on 8th notes for the most part. There's a few little places where we're using some 16ths, but let's hear what this sounds like. And then we move into the other half of the pattern, and here it is all as one. Okay, so this is more of an 8th note pattern. What is this instrumentation-wise, right? So this is another Arteria V collection, again with the low end rolled off, and this is just a plain old clean delay, not like an analog clone. What is the instrument though? So this is it's actually Pigments. Right, and it's the analog unison preset in Pigments. Right, again, Berlin School pluck gets a little more metallic or shrill in the high end, so I don't go too high with that, and I use it as a mid-range arpeggiation. Right, and there's some fat reverb on it, which I think is internal to the synth itself, to the preset. So I'm not processing it out here. I'm not using any send returns with reverb on it. So the first pluck and the second pluck, when you hear them on top of each other, go back, pluck 1 and pluck 2, right, is and that is how we get that sort of Berlin School tone for me. Now, let's keep going. If we keep running through, eventually we're going to get to, we'll just keep going down the instrument list rather than go in time. I'm not going to do it as each instrument comes in because we've already missed a bunch of stuff. We'll move from top down through the project. So our next instrument would be the Skitter Pad. What is that? All right. Let's close these up. I'll try and keep it tidy. All right, so Skitter Pad. Let's hear what this sounds like. All right, so this is another V collection synth. Again, EQ, little EQ. Here's an EQ I'm not actually using. Get rid of that. And this is going to Valhalla Supermassive sort of black hole style reverb. This is a free plugin you can get from Valhalla online, basically. It's a great tool. So what is this? This is a DX7, actually, out of the V collections, called Lively Arps. Now this is an example where I'm not arpeggiating this myself. I'm letting it use its inbuilt arpeggiator. Right, so if we go look at the pattern here. Close, thank you. Right, I'm just playing single notes and letting it arpeggiate. Go through here. Okay, so if we layer that with our previous two sort of arpeggiations. it's getting pretty thick. So we don't use it at the beginning. We sort of introduce all these, and they slowly come in over time, and they build up. And you know, that's a good bed, right? That arpeggiation, especially combined with those long reverb tails, turns into this bed that just screams B minor, B flat minor. So you've got this sort of dark undercurrent, and then we use the bass and the lead to tell the story with melodies, right? The bass is actually playing a melody, and the lead voices are playing melodies. We'll get to those. Let's see. Did I skip over? Oh, I did. I skipped over the leads. Duh. All right, let me go back. So that well, let's finish with the arpeggiation stuff. All right, so that's Pluck 1, Pluck 2, Skitter Pad, and this Chaos Twins. All right, and there's two of these running in unison. I'll get to that in a minute. But if we just listen to them, what we're hearing is this. Note that this is the same notation. So this synth, Skitter Pad is playing Chaos Twins are playing the same thing as the Skitter Pad, okay, from a note perspective. So why is there two of them? They're pushed hard left and hard right, and one of them has like a 3 millisecond delay on it to sort of use that Haas effect to push it really broad, really wide. It doesn't actually sound like a delay, because otherwise it's sort of real. I don't want it centered in the stereo field. I want this sort of feeling of separation. What is this synth though? This is another V Collection synth. This is Prophet VS, right? So a wavetable synth, a preset called Time Machine. All right, and so these are playing the same thing. If I look at their channel, so we've got the synth running into a little ambience. So I want it to sound like room. I don't always use giant black hole reverbs. Sometimes I want them to seem more in your face and maybe have a little bit of a slap back. And the difference between the two. This one's also got a little delay on the end. This delay is just 2.87, 3 milliseconds of delay, 100% wet. So what's happening here is this one is just playing, and it's panned to the right. And then this one is playing and panned to the left with this delay on it. Right, the difference, if I didn't do that, what it would sound like, it would sound like this. Right, it's pretty dead centered at that point. And then here's your ambience. Here it is without the ambience of the ambient reverb. Right, so I put a little room. It sounds like it's in a room at that point. And then I spread it out. Right, 30. And since everything else has got this giant wash of huge spacey reverb, having this come in when everything sort of fades away, it's in this break when the arps all stop and this one keeps running. It makes it it's a nice texture change in the track. So if you're listening, if you listen to the track when this part comes in and the other arps fade away, it's a very distinctive sort of change in the feel. All right, so those are all the arps. Okay, that's all the arpeggiation is happening in these yellow channels. We talked about the pads. I skipped over these leads. Let's talk about the leads. All right. I guess I did the soft lead. That was that Deckard's Dream sort of swell from Atmosphere. Let's talk about the hard lead here. All right, so this is the other. These two voices, the two leads, basically alternate throughout the song. We have that softer Deckard's Dream swell, and then this was originally written as one track, just using that Deckard's Dream, and I wanted some variation on it. So what I did is I split it. I gave another instrument, the hard lead, a different sound, and I pulled these clips from the Deckard's track down into the hard lead track, and now it alternates. And so you've basically got a conversation going on back and forth, and at the end of the song, they play together to give you, big grand ending. So what is this synth? Well, let's hear it. Okay. This is what we're hearing. So there's the melody. What it is Omnisphere. And again, we have some processing with EQ, roll off the low end, bump the high end a little bit. I've got a little bit of compression on it. I'll talk about that in a second. Some echo. Again, the chorus, the Roland Dimension D chorus to give it a little subtle spread, and a little utility plugin at the end. Now, let's talk about Omnisphere here. What's happening here? This is actually a multi. So there's two. Omnisphere has 8 sort of 8-part multi-timbral, if you wish. So what I've done is I've set a sound on part 1 and I've set a sound on part 2. I've layered them together. Okay, and they're about the equal sort of volume, right? But what it is the first sound is this pulse width unison lead. And the second one is an octave higher, this analog. Right, that's almost a CS80 as well. It's this sort of swell that comes in. It's a kind of a horn. It's got a horn sort of moi sort of opening. And when you layer them on top of each other, I get the lead that I want, a harder lead than that Deckard's Dream swell. Right, so that pulse width unison lead comes in immediately. It's real buzzy. And then this softer and warmer analog swell comes in an octave higher above it. And then the pulse width actually has, if I go back to it, the pulse width has glide turned on. So there's some portamento in it when I'm playing, and the second one, the analog, the softer analog one, doesn't, right? So you'll hear the buzzy part swell and glide. You'll hear the buzzy part glide while the second part is swelling. Swell. And there's that glide, right? So that's basically how I built this. And again, those are presets. I haven't tweaked them. I just layered them, all right? Because I'm looking for classic voices. So take from that what you will, all right? When I want to write orchestral music, I don't design the violins and the cellos and stuff. I just say, I need a violin and a cello sound. Okay, when I'm doing Berlin School synth music, I'm like, I need a CS80 swell, or I need a buzzy, sort of synced lead or pulse width lead. That's what I want. Can I go build them myself? Yes, I could, but if I've got a musical idea in my head, or I've got a melody I want to get down, I'm just not going to do it. Your mileage may vary. Do what works for you. Okay. So those are our 2 main voices as far as the lead is concerned in this piece. Okay. So what have we done? We've covered pads, we've covered leads, we've covered plucks. Let's talk about basses. Okay. The bass in this song is my favorite bass of all time, and the bass is actually made up of 3 layers. All right. If we go back, and we'll start with the low drone. All right. So this is what we get at the beginning. Right. This is what's running underneath these pads. Right. So those pads are playing. And this drone, this is just a drone. That's all I want. I want a low end. I want it in B flat. And I just want it to just sit there and play. What is it? This is a contact instrument. Actually, if I flip over, this instrument is the highest CPU usage of all the instruments I'm doing using this thing. I'll show you at the end. I'll show you the CPU usage will break down across all of the instruments. This instrument uses more CPU than any other instrument that I've got running in the system. And it is a contact preset. And this is out of the Straylight library. And it is called Nightmares. Okay, so Straylight is one of the libraries in Complete. I think you can buy it by itself. Straylight, here it is, the Straylight library. It's interesting. Close this up. There it is, Straylight. This is a fantastic instrument. Like, if you don't want to pay for all of Complete, buying Straylight is nice. It's full of really good drones, a really good Berlin School textures. This is not a review of that stuff, but I am using this. It's called Nightmares from Straylight. It is CPU heavy though, and that might be because I'm on an M1 Mac, and contact, while it says it's ready for M1, maybe they need to do some tweaking to make it more efficient. That could be part of the problem. Or it could be that stray light, there's a big fat reverb and there's some grain stuff in there that might be just CPU heavy. But that's our drone. That drone occurs here, it occurs in the middle, it occurs at the end. Real plain, okay? So that's one bass. Let's talk about the other basses. So here is a bass. You'll get a kick out of this. Let's talk about this instrument. That's maybe too low for you to hear if you're in like earbuds or something like that, okay? But what this is another low drone. And it's also got sort of a taiko drum happening on the downbeat. It's like a heartbeat. And that's literally what I'm using it for. All right, later I have it running in playing the roots of the chords that I'm playing. And it's alternating between, I think, B flat and F. F sharp. All right, not exciting, but it provides a heartbeat for the bass line, okay? So let's go back and talk about my favorite part. This is totally my favorite part of the bass. This is a big, fat bass from Omnisphere, okay? A little tweaking in the EQ, a little Dimension D chorus. Let's listen to this. Oh, I love it. All right, so what is that? That is Confronting Fear from Omnisphere. It's actually from an expansion patch set for Omnisphere called, or Sonic Extension, I guess they're calling them. It's an add-on patch library called Undercurrent. That is the Confronting Fear sound. Now, what is that, though? It's basically a Moog saw, 3 oscillator wide saw. So it's an oscillator that's 3 octaves worth of oscillator laid on top of a mini Moog saw. Basically, it's just Moog saws on top of saws. If you've watched my video on the mini Moog I just took purchase of a couple weeks ago, I am in love with that sound, right? So could I have just gone and used the Moog? Would it have sounded different? I don't know. Maybe we can do a comparison at some point. But I know I wanted this sound. This is right out of like Clockwork Orange for me. I love the sort of sound. And so let me pull it up a little bit and give you a higher pitched bit. Actually, we'll play this part out here. So if we do this. Right, it's got a little bit of that dirt in there, a little overdriven moginess, and then go down. Oh yeah, I love that. So I use bass as a melody instrument a lot. I don't sidechain my bass with my kicks or anything like that. I know that's a great technique and it's really useful in a lot of genres of music. I do not do that. I want the bass to be actually more prominent than the rhythm parts usually, because I tend to write melodies with the bass, and I basically my bass and then my vocal lines, my high melody lines, they talk to each other, right? If you go through my music, certainly in this song, if you go through and you look at the intervals that are happening between the bass and the melody, that's where the interesting stuff is happening. Okay, I'll give you one example of that towards the end here. But I really like this deep Moog sound, right? So it really cuts through, and I keep it way up in the mix. Maybe too much, maybe you're not a fan. But that's basically the bass outline, right? We've got a drone. We've got another drone that's got sort of a heartbeat, sort of taiko drum running on the downbeats. And then we've got this big, fat, multi-layered Moog Clockwork Orange style deep bass that I use to play low melodies. All right. So where have we been? So we talked about where we are instrument wise. So if you want to replicate my rig here, go buy Omnisphere. Go buy. You'll need the V collection, or at least pieces of it, right? You don't have to buy the whole thing. Or you have equivalent hardware, or just generate those sounds using whatever synths you want, right? Hive, Falcon. A lot of my friends use UVI Falcon. You could do all of this in anything, right? We live in an amazing time of synthesizer goodness. As a synth seeker, you can build almost anything in almost anything, right? It's only on the extreme fringes do you need a specialized piece of hardware or software. The bulk of stuff you can make one way or the other by either layering or getting good at synth programming yourself. Let's see. Let's keep going. All right. So we've got some, I wouldn't call it bass, but sort of guitar zone, low mid sort of places going on. Let's talk about this. What is this instrument? This is Taste. All right, this is a fun one. So this is actually the rhythm part of the song. This is the drums, okay? But it's a bass instrument that's just got a really sharp attack when it's playing its notes. So we got to disassemble this a little bit. All right, because there's a lot going on here. So this is an Omnisphere patch. I'm going to turn off some of the processing for a second, okay? So this is an Omnisphere patch called Spittle Circuit Straight, okay? And this is out of the Bob Moog Tribute Library, which is another Omnisphere expansion that I highly recommend. Mostly because the money goes to charity. The Bob Moog Foundation is awesome if you're going to contribute to a charity and you're a synth nerd. That's the one to contribute to because it goes towards music and electronic education for children, or it did at the time. I haven't actually kept up on it. So it's Christmas and I didn't give to them this year, but I do keep buying stuff from their store. So I like their artwork. Anyway, so that's this sound, right? So what does this sound like clean? That's what it is. All right. And so it's a little Juno 106 sub and one of their presets, right? These are their layers, right? It's called Spittle Circuit Straight, all right? Their arpeggiation is doing. All right. Well, so we turn this into the, ooh, got something still playing there. We'll come back to it. So, and it's just playing, it's running its own arpeggiation, then it does a little walk up, right? So these are playing the rhythm part and the sort of mid bass, all right? Processing wise though, what I do is I'm running it through a drum bus and I'm giving it a little crunch, right? I'm distorting it a bit, adding a little drive, a little crunch, damping it down, playing with the transient control, dialing it. And so without, and just a little bit. And what it's doing is it's accentuating those, it's pushing a little grit into the, not so much the kick part, but the higher da-da-da-das. All right, and I accentuate that a bit with the EQ, but then I turn on a little ambience. This is a Valhalla room reverb, and then I turn on a phaser, also from Valhalla. Right, I think I left a bass on. I did. All right. So what's happening is this sort of mid-bass part with this sort of rhythm, sort of a transience on it is getting gridded up a bit, pushed up a little bit, given a little bump. Then it's run into a room reverb that provides an ambience, okay? And then I'm taking that whole thing and I'm phasing it with this Valhalla space modulator, which I think this is free as well, okay? And I'm using a preset in here, and you could set this up in any phaser. It's basically or flanger. It's an infinite upwards motion, right? So basically, it's flanging up constantly, and there is a loop in there, but the way they've got their feedback set up, you don't hear the edges of the loop, and it just sounds like it's rising forever, okay? And it's at the end of the chain after the reverb, which is not something that you do often, right? So what it's doing is it's phasing the ambience as well as the instrument sound up, 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 always. And really, it's just, if that's not like a sci-fi space rhythm part, I don't know what is. You know, in isolation, it sounds, it may sound annoying, right? But in the mix, especially with that deep bass going on, it's just, it works for me, right? I think it applies that what you're hearing there is the engine of the spaceship, right? Whatever their dilithium crystals are in there, right? That's the sound of that engine running. Right? And I use it throughout the piece whenever I want something to basically have the rhythm part running behind it and some chug in there, right? I also have another section for chug. We'll talk about that. But so that's what that is. And that was Omnisphere. Okay. Now, other stuff going on. This is a little piece that happens only at the end. All right. Let me play this for you. Right. Everyone knows this sound, right? What is that, right? So this is Omnisphere. You could do this in anything, though. So this is a sample and hold, a random sort of frequency shift, the filter frequencies being randomly changed with a sample and hold, and then this is actually playing a chug kind of synth sound. What is this? This is the wide grinder preset out of Omnisphere, right? And it's just a saw square, whatever their saw square oscillator shape is. And essentially it is, let's go look at the details here. So the filters, this juicy 24 dB. Let's look at the mod stuff. Let's see. There we go. So basically in Omnisphere, one thing I really like about Omnisphere, right, is its mod envelopes are basically parameter locks. Like if you like the Electron style of parameter locking things, you would love all of the 4 mod envelopes in Omnisphere, because that's basically what it's for. It's for going through and defining a loop. Right, and this is controlling, I believe, the filter frequency. They're only using this first one. So this is with one envelope. And you just draw in, you know, whatever rhythmic shape you want. It's great. Okay, so that's this chug that we've got going on, and then later that's doing a walk up later. It's, and this is just going to run under that super Moog layered bass. Basically, if I bring it back in, we've got this going on. Right, the climax of the song is basically this. All right, so that's what that is. So this sort of, we've got the bass stuff going on, and then I've got it layering with this sort of mid-chug stuff. And then lastly, I've also got this piece going on. What was this? Oh, helps if you unmute it. Here we go. I think this is another ARP. It is. Yeah, and this is using the internal ARP to the patch. This is Omnisphere. Okay, so this is following the chord progression of the section of the song, and I've basically got it pitched up and a fifth added on top of it. So I'm basically playing a little fifth interval and feeding it into, what is this? It's also out of the Moog tribute library, the Bellini bouncer, right? And this is again using their ARP. And I think this was just some sparkle texture that I wanted on this piece, this part of the song. If we actually, where are we here? If we listen to this. Yeah. All right, so in the middle of the song, there's a whole section, a chord progression that goes through that plays this sort of bridging melody in the middle of the song. You only hear it once in that middle part. And it sort of ties the front half and the back half together, and that's where we use this particular piece. All right, and then let's see. Oh, the riser. So adding a little tension. I have a point in the song where I'm like, okay, we've finished collecting our resources. We arrive at this place. We arrive at Cassiopeia X-1. The ship's like, okay, well, this is a waypoint. theoretically in this particular science fiction universe, the ships are traveling by slingshotting around, gravitational bodies, and they need some fuel. Every time they stop, they have to pick up whatever resources they have in the area to power the next jump in their trip. It's sort of the concept I had in my head. And so the first half of the song, they arrive, then they start gathering resources, then they've got those resources, and then there is this sort of lead up to, okay, powering up the engines, getting ready to do the slingshot maneuver. And so we've got this riser section that, isn't just a blatant riser. We're going to bring the emotional sort of energy level up, and then boom, they're going to explode and take off. And I'm literally using an Arp riser out of Omnisphere that's running through a Valhalla shimmer reverb. And it's like this. Right? It's just a chord that I'm holding, and I'm letting it slowly rising up. It's opening up the filter. What is it called? Filter Suite Build Up Arp. Literally. Boom, right? And then all the instruments come back in, the bass comes crashing in, there's a big, rhythmic boom, and the ship, bam, shoots off towards the pulsar. It's going to slingshot around and then continue its journey. So a little, I didn't do there's no drop in this particular piece, right? But there is a riser, so electronic music roots, right? And that's just straight out of Omnisphere. Let's keep going. We're almost done here. So we got some big booms going on in this song, right? Things that go boom. So these are just little risers with risers leading up to booms that fade out. That's from Contact. Let's hear one of them. All right. Let's hear a different one. Another one, right? So what are these? There is a Contact library called Rise and Hit. I don't have it loaded right here because what I do is I just built these risers as samples and save them. And so I've got a collection of sample Rise and Hits that are out of the Rise and Hit library from Contact. Actually, here, I'll just show it to you real quick. Let's see. We go plugins, we go native instruments, we go Contact. Let's just drop a Contact in real quick. All right. And let's see, Rise and Hit. Here it is, Rise and Hit. It's part of Complete. You can buy it by itself. Just pull it up. And it's just got a huge collection of rises and hits. And you specify how many measures you want them to be, how long you want them to be, 4 bars, 8 bars, whatever. How long is the lead up? And then you can load either you can go through their library of here are all their rises, their flavors, right? And pick one of them. And then you can go through, and this is what I want to glue onto the end of it as a hit, right? And you can play them. Oh, should probably unmute. There we go. Right? Or you can just play the hit. It's a great tool. I use it a lot, right? And they'll take these and then process them, things like that. You can change the offset of the samples, things like that. It's a very nice tool, easy to manipulate, and pull it. And it runs well. So I basically made a bunch of these risers and hits, and I use them throughout the piece whenever there's a transition between sections or some dramatic moment that's happening. All right, so that's the riser booms. All right, and then I've got the boom drums. All right, so what are these? Let's listen. Right, that's it. I've used that throughout the entire piece in combination with the risers. So if we put that together, see what it sounds like. All right, so there's drama, instant drama, a riser and a boom. You've got cinematic drama immediately at that point. So what are these? So this is actually a drum loop tool from Spectrasonics, the same people who make Omnisphere. That's called Stylus. All right. And this is an 8-part multi-timbral drum loop player. All right. And you can load up various drum loops, and they're all sequenced via MIDI, right? So internally, there are a bunch of slices put together. Here, let me do this. Here we go. So what does this sound like? This is the loop that I'm using. All right. It's just drum loops, right? There's lots of them, variants. Right? It's just a drum loop tool. Now it's a really good one, but the thing is, you load up that loop, and I'm not using the loop, I'm just using that one hit out of it. Well, where is that? Well, if you actually pull the MIDI clip with that out of there, you drag and drop it into your thing. Actually, I'll show you that real quick. So the way you use Stylus is you pick the loop you want, and then you actually drag the clip out into your music, right? And so here it is. And if I tell this to play, there's the clip, right? Well, these notes down here are the big booms, and the rest of this is the rhythm part, okay? And what I'm doing is I took that clip and I edited it, and I just use that much of it. That's it. And so I use that as a big cinematic drum tool. I just literally steal slices out of the Spectrasonics Stylus drum library, right? It's super useful. And you can actually, if you're using it for like regular drum loops, that's actually how I do my drum programming. I'll take that MIDI loop and I will go in by hand and sort of move things around. And that's how I do custom fills and things like that and make my custom drum parts. If you listen to my EP floating out there on Bandcamp, there's a 3-song EP that basically all the rhythm in it is Stylus RMX with me going through and customizing the MIDI by hand to do fills and things like that. And it works great and it sounds really good. So consider doing that if you want, if you're looking for a new idea. So that's our risers, the riser booms, the big booms. Oh, and hat claps. What are these? Oh, this is a Stylus loop that I literally just stole. It's just a loop. Sounds like. That's it. I needed a sort of tribal's probably not the right word, but I needed this sort of, ethnic instrument feel. I just needed a metronomic sort of bada 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 bada, and I wanted it, and it works pretty well when I put these together. Right? That's film music, epic space saga rhythm part. And that's what's happening. And then we just use that twice during the highlights. All right. Okay. So I think that's everything. So that's all the instruments. That's basically the sum of the instrumentation. Let's just listen to this little bit we were looking at. So this is going to be a riser up to a boom with our dramatic drum parts. Our arps will be running. We've got our melody playing. Our basses are doing their thing. And it sounds like... we don't want the voices yet. Do, do, do. So there you go. Cinematic drums. You've got your swell, your Blade Runner swell playing its melody. You've got your arps doing their thing. And our basses in your face playing a little melody. So that's the breakdown of all the instrumentation, okay? Those are the instruments used in this piece. So let's talk about the voices, all right? The voices. Boop. All right, so what are these voices? Well, I originally just recorded them myself, right? So the first drafts of this were me just saying the phrases that I want said. But I wanted to have a story going on in these pieces, right? So what happens is I write the dialogue, I record it, I fit it in where I think it's going to work to tell a story. And all of the words that they're saying are kind of ambiguous, right? It's implied what's going on, and then the listener sort of builds up the actual story in their head, right? So these people could be pirates that are, on a mission, or they could be explorers that are doing something, or there could be, a military sort of approach. I don't really there's nothing, no words are said that would indicate one way or the other what this is. This lets the listener sort of dream up the story as they're doing this. But there's definitely an implied story of a ship arrives in the system, they need fuel, they gather resources, they've got it, they get ready for their jump, they make the jump, they're successful, right? So what is this? Let's hear a couple examples.
Coming up on our waypoint control.
Roger that, Wayfarer. You are go for insertion.
All right, so what is that? So I've got 4 characters here, right? I've got a captain, I've got a navigator, I've got the ship's AI, and then I've got like the launch control, the control, like ground base. The ship is talking to another sort of control guy that's far away, and they're talking to him through a relay. Okay, so that's why you hear those beeps.
Coming up on our waypoint control.
Roger that, Wayfarer. You are go for insertion.
All right, so you get those beeps. I was trying to set this up so it's like, okay, I gotta have these voices, and I gotta have them sort of transform so they're sounding like they're, going through some sort of space transmission, whatever, space CB. And I was listening to, NASA clips, because that was what I was originally going to do. I was going to, go buy or borrow or steal clips of astronauts talking through, NASA things. But I really wanted to tell a story. So those little beeps I learned, this is my one piece of knowledge. Here's your learning section. Those are called Quindar Tones. I know I've typed this up everywhere where I've shared this music because I thought this was just so fascinating. They're little sine wave beeps that are 250 milliseconds long. That are used by the ground control people. It's a push-to-talk system. So when they press the button on their console down, that opens up their mic and lets them start transmitting. When they push that, it sends that tone out there to the transmitter to say, okay, start transmitting. And when they're done talking and they let go of the button, it beeps again with a slightly different pitch to indicate to the transmitter, you can shut yourself off. So when you listen, if you're ever listening to any like NASA or space transmissions that use this sort of technique, with digital stuff, they don't have to do it. They were limited by their bandwidth and by duplex. But what happens is the ground control people, when they press that button to talk, it'll beep, and when they let go, it'll beep again. When the astronauts talk, we're always listening to them. So there's actually no beeps for them. The beeps are just the beginning and end of the ground control people talking. So that's what's happening here. You're going to hear those beeps to the control guy when he begins and ends talking, and the rest is just inline. So let's talk about processing these voices. Where do these voices come from? First of all, Fiverr. All right, you can talk to your friends. Friends are always great, especially if you've got friends who work in dramatic things like theater. Right, you get them to be voice actors, right? Because they'll often do it for free. But I was, sometimes they can be like nobody steps up. If you need a voice actor, the best place for you to find a voice actor on the cheap is Fiverr, fiverr.com. It's a place where people will do remote online jobs for you, like voice acting and things like that. And I spent maybe $60. Basically, it was like $20 for one person and $30 for the other, and then you give them a tip and things like that at the end. But basically, you tell them, "Hey, here's a script I want you to read for me." The job cost varies by how many words you want, and so the minimum was like 200 words. I think I had 120 words I needed them to read, and so I just paid them. And the turnaround time is like 3 or 4 days. And you get to do revisions. You hear it, and you're like, "Is that good? How's the delivery?" And to make it work better for them, make it easier for them and work better for you. It's better if you record yourself saying the words the way you want it to be said. Like you do the emotive part. You say, "Okay, yeah, it's kind of like this," and then you say it, and then you have them do it. Now, I played around with me doing everything and then pitch shifting and using voice changers on my voice, and that can work. especially the new sort of AI stuff, the sort of deep learning driven stuff. But honestly, getting a different person to do the voice acting for each character, it just sounds better, I think, sometimes. Maybe they're not the greatest voice actor, and then your mileage may vary, but I had a really good time. So our captain is this woman from New Zealand, and she basically delivered, let me turn off all the processing on her. She delivered a wonderful little performance. Let's turn off everything and see what it sounds like. Oh, EQ. All right, here she is.
Coming up on our waypoint control.
Okay, that's basically what she sounds like. And I took the channel EQ, bumped the mids a lot. I'll get to that in the shifter in a second. I used an EQ to do what's basically a telephone vocal. I think this is actually a preset in Ableton for their EQ. When they're doing transmissions, they band limit it. You really just want just the frequencies coming through that are relevant to the voice. And then I also compressed the hell out of it. And then I used Pitch Hack to introduce a little tiny bit of warble in it and a little bit of chorus as well. And I had it like this.
Coming up on our waypoint control.
Okay. So, and then someone said to me, hey, have you ever seen the newer Battlestar Galactica? You should go listen to the ship-to-ship chatter there because it sounds really awesome. And I went and listened, and it turns out they're using a ring modulator in Battlestar Galactica. It's one of the technique I think it is a ring mod. That same effect that's used to create the Dalek voices in Doctor Who. Well, a more subtle, less extreme ring mod is used to do ship chatter, sort of sound mangling in Battlestar Galactica. Well, Ableton's got a built-in ring mod, and so I started playing with it, and this is what we end up with.
Coming up on our waypoint control.
Can you hear there's some sideband back channels? I'm going to loop this. Let me loop this. It's going to be kind of annoying, but I'm going to play with the sidebands, and you'll hear what's going on there.
Coming up on our waypoint control. Coming up on our waypoint control. Coming up on our waypoint control. Coming up on our waypoint control.
So you basically get the voice through the ring mod does these sidebands. It sounds a bit like Munchkins combined with a deeper sort of monster voice. And that's when it's fully wet. And then you just dial in wet dry to get it about where you want for this sort of mangled space transmission.
Coming up on our waypoint control.
I love it. You can also hear this used, they use a ring mod on the voices for transmission in Star Wars. So if you look at any of the early Star Wars films where the fighters are talking back to ground control when they're battling the Death Star and their voices sound garbled, it's a ring mod. It's a very distinct sound. You can sort of pick up on it. Anyway, so there's your sound design history lesson for this episode. Okay, I'm going way long on this. So basically, I've got these tracks of recordings that I got from people, and they've sent them back to me, and they sound, I think, excellent.
Braking maneuver in 3, 2, 1.
Right? And
Let's get to work, people. Gather what we can, and then we're on our way.
then we've got our...
All systems nominal. Welcome to Cassiopeia X1.
Right? There's a voice actor, Mike. I have links in the description of the actual piece to these voice actors. If you like these sounds, you can click on that link, go to Fiverr, and have them do voice acting for you. But that's basically it. I place these in time manually in the course of the song at the dramatic moments I wanted the story to be spoken with. One thing that I wanted to do that was interesting, this is the first time I did this, was when you lay the voices over top of the music, especially these voices that are compressed into this mid-band and then compressed in level so that they're pretty loud, actually. How do you get them to sit right? You could do sort of compression ducking. You can do riding the vocals, or you can try ducking the music by hand as it's going. What I actually ended up doing this time, and I think it worked pretty well, was I used a tool. I used a tool called Neutron from Isotope, which is a mixing sort of AI sort of tool. And I didn't use any of its actual mixing intelligence. It's got a feature on it called masking. And so what you do is I've got all the voices bussed to a single bus that I've called voices, and I have all the music bussed to a single bus called not voices. Okay, in Ableton, this bus it's a grouping, right? But it's effectively a bus. So I've got these two sort of groupings, these two buses. One's the voices and one's everything that's not a voice. And I feed the voices from the voice bus into the not voice bus into the Neutron plugin. Okay, I pull this up and I use a single tool in there called the Unmask tool. And what it does is it analyzes the frequencies that are coming in from the voices and pulls and sort of auto EQs out the frequencies in all of the music that are overlapping with the voices. So basically it automatically carves out room in the music's frequency spectrum for the voices only when the voices are speaking. And it works great. I really like it. So I'll demonstrate, we'll get a little piece of that. Let's find a vocal. So there's our music frequencies. And the voices come in purple.
Let's get to work, people.
And you can see
what we can, and then we're on our way.
Yeah, the orange is masking out that stuff.
Let's get to work, people. Gather what we can, and then we're on our way.
Now, looking at this, I think I've screwed up something during the course of my demonstration here, and I've got some of the rhythm part also coming in and being masked, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Anyway, this is a great tool. This unmask feature of Neutron is really, really useful. So check it out if you're doing this sort of thing where you're trying to get voices or spoken word to fit over music, and you don't want to have to ride the volume, because ducking works, but it can be distracting. Like the listener can hear the ducking. Sometimes it can pull them out of the moment. This way, it seemed to work a lot better. All right, this entire piece. So let's talk about staying in key. This entire piece is B flat minor. Every note you're hearing, for the most part, barring mistakes that are there but are hidden, everything is out of the B minor scale. Okay, and if you look at any of the Berlin School videos I talked about, I'm like, pick a scale and stick with it, right? It helps you maintain a sort of tonal center and a sort of mood associated with that scale, all right? But here's an example where going outside of the scale can add a lot of tension, and I only do it once in the entire piece, but I do it right here. Now, this gray bar here, so these are all the notes. Everything in the purple is in scale, except for this note right here. Right, this A, all right. This is outside of the B flat minor scale, and it's really, really dissonant, right? This A, if you play B flat and A together, they're a minor second apart. They're going to sound really, really sour, right? A lot of tension, okay. But what I've done throughout the entire course of the piece is I've set you up and trained your brain to be listening for this B minor, right? When we get to this part of the song, we're going to play this A, and it's going to form this chord that has a lot of tension in it, and it just sounds like kind of like a God chord. It's very much a cinematic, spacey experience, right? So it sounds like this.
On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark.
And then out of key. Anyway, so I have yet in all of my videos had an example where I can show you that says, okay, here's where when you play out of the key you're in, it can also be awesome, right? So this is the only one I've got recorded, documented in a video, right? So we're in B flat minor, and sometimes it's appropriate to step out of that key to like the harshest possible interval, right? This is an A on top of a B flat. And it sustains for a long time. It really sings out that we are dark in this moment, right? Or not dark so much as we are in deep space in the void, right? And so that I just wanted to point that out to you. So this one note is outside the key of the entire piece. And I consider doing it in a few other places as well, repeating again, but I like it in that one spot. All right, so that's it for the music production stuff, right? And if that's all you're interested, thanks for watching. This is Synth Seeker. Have a great weekend. If you want to know about the video stuff, how we did the video production, that's what I'm going to cover for the rest of this here. If you want to say, like, if you watch the video for the piece and you're like, oh, I like all the dancing lights of the visualization, how did you do that? I'm just going to quickly touch on the tools I used to do that and how I changed this project into a visualization project, okay? So I'm going to load a different project file and show you what's going on there, okay? So hang on a second. Okay, so we're back. Now this looks a whole lot simpler. What is this? All right, I am using a tool called Visual Synth from a company called Imaginando. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Okay. VS, Visual Synth. All right. And what this is a visualization tool that behaves like a synthesizer. It has 8 parts. It's 8-part multi-timbral plus a background layer. And you can think of the parts are visual layers on the screen. Okay. And this is not going to be an explanation of how to use Visual Synth. You have to read the manual on this one and go watch their demo videos. But I'm going to show you what the individual layers are and how I use it in Ableton. Okay, so what's in this project? So what I did was I took my finished other musical project, okay, and I saved a copy of it, all right? And then I took that copy and I removed all of the synths from it, and I kept only the tracks that had sort of voices in the song that I wanted something to do on the screen. I know I wanted to have some bouncing lights. I wanted bouncing lights for the leads, and I wanted some bouncing lights for the arpeggios and a bouncing light for the bass, right? So I saved those tracks. I saved the lead. So I've got the soft lead, the hard lead. I've got the upper and lower arpeggiation plucks. I saved the bass part, and I saved one of the chaos plucks. Okay, so I have 6 sort of instruments that I want to have visually represented on the screen, okay? And I deleted everything else out of the project, right? And then on these synths, if you look at these MIDI channels, there's MIDI, but there's nothing here. There's no synth plugin, right? I removed the synth plugins and everything, okay? So this is, real low CPU stuff, not much going on there. And then I dropped in a rendered 2-track audio of the song. I put the song in here, right? And it syncs up with the MIDI, right? So here's the song, here's the MIDI. This isn't generating any sound anymore, but the audio is here, okay? And then on this track, this is the key thing, I've got the Visual Synth plugin. And I am, through the sidechain, I am running the song audio into this plugin, okay? That's how that works. Now, so I've got the MIDI for my 2 leads, for my set of arps, and my basses, and another arp here. Okay, so let's look at this plugin. The way it works is when you're running that stuff in, here, let's do this. You'll see that my soft lead here is being routed to the Visual Synth track it has 16 inputs. So it's going into input 1. My second lead is going into input 2. My third lead, input 3. My fourth lead, input 4. My bass is going into 5. My fourth lead. And this chaos pluck thing is going into 6. All right. And then through the sidechain, I'm routing the audio into there as well. Okay. And I've actually got the audio shut off from the mains. So the Visual Synth will route its audio to the mains. All right. Then we open up Visual Synth. Again, you've got to read the manual. I cannot show you how to use this UI. The UI from a UI design perspective is cool looking, but it's a little confusing. It's a lot confusing, but it's consistent and it does make sense. But what happens is you've got these little 8 layers along the bottom here. And I've got these layers associated with these inputs that's coming in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if I look at these layers, I'll look at this one here and I will solo it. All right. All right, so we're hearing the audio that's coming through the plugin. The MIDI triggers this element, all right? And the notes that come in will make the element move. And you do that by mapping the MIDI, the keyboard, like which note it is, to, I've got it mapped to the color, and I've also got it mapped to the Y coordinate, that's the up-down position of the circle, and I've got it mapped to its radius. So the circle both moves, changes size, and changes the circle moves, changes size and color based on the MIDI that comes in. Okay. That's how that works. That's layer 1. All right. If we look at layer 2, I solo it, so just looking at layer 2. We go over to the second instrument here, is what this one is. Right. Bring Nando back up and hit play.
All systems nominal.
This is the hard lead.
Cassiopeia X-1.
And that's this one. Same thing. I've got basically the position, the radius, and the color assigned to what MIDI note is coming in. And so when the MIDI note comes in, it triggers the thing, it gets drawn to the screen, and it starts moving around as the MIDI plays. Okay? And I've done that 6 times. All right. And then my 7th and 8th layer is this sort of the 3D sort of roadway on the left and the star field in the background, right? So if I do the roadway, solo it, there's my roadway. And I've got that just running on its own and changing color over time. It just looks cool. And this is the area where the pictures of the users of the crew members come up, right? And then the star field is just a star field. And these are all canned shaders that come with it. I'm not going to get into what a shader is. You can write your own shaders if you know GL. If you can write shaders, you can totally take this tool and make it absolutely custom. I'm effectively using elements that come with it, and I'm putting them together myself. I'm taking their sort of pre-made ingredients and mixing them together to cook up my own little recipe here. All right. And so you can use this to generate the image, the video itself of what's going on. Save that as its own video file, okay? And you'll get the dancing lights, all of the visualization that reacts to the MIDI and audio of the track. I do with Visual Synthesizer. All right. Now, once I have exported that, close this up. Once I've exported that video, I'll have the audio track. I've got the video of the dancing lights that works together. Then I'm going to I use a tool called ScreenFlow to make my videos, and you can use whatever you want, right? It's just a video editing tool. Generally, it's aimed at screen capture. But if we pull up Cas X-1, all right. So like a lot of stuff, it's a timeline, okay? Here's the video that I generated. Let's mute the audio for a second. So here's all the dancing lights, et cetera, right? Composite that together. I manually go through and just sync these up. I know, where they are as far as what's happening. Syncing video to audio is really not an issue. You just zoom in far enough, make sure you've got a point that you can synchronize on. And then I've got these characters that come in here. So whenever a character is playing in the audio here, I place a graphic in my tool on the timeline to show the face of the character who is talking, right? And the dialogue plays over it, and that's where we go, all right? That's not hard. You can generate, if you're an artist and you have the time to do your own drawings, you can. All of the art that's being done, that's shown for this piece, all these faces of the characters, they were built using a tool called MidJourney, which is an AI art generation tool that I subscribe to. And basically I read its manual, okay, RTFM. I read its manual and said, okay, I need to generate some comic book style characters for a sci-fi piece. And I used MidJourney to generate those characters. And then I also used MidJourney to generate the frame they're in, and then I just composited them together in a little photo editing tool to make these little pop-ups. It took, an hour or two, not a big time. And then that's how the video is made. So the music plays, the visualization is synchronized under it, and these pieces pop up whenever someone says something. And that's how it works. All right. So the tools are Visual Synthesizer from Imaginando. I also use Pixelmator, which is a Mac app in the App Store that's my visual editing software. And I use ScreenFlow to composite everything together. And that's how I do it. So, this is a long ass video. So that's where we're at. All right. If I hope I gave you information you wanted either about the music production side or the video production side. And I really thank you. Everyone has been super super kind in their feedback on this particular project. I'm really happy with it. I'm going to continue down this road. I like telling these sort of sci-fi or fantasy stories, these musical stories, with some form of audio visualization on top of it. Now, if you are a visual artist, if you're an animator, I'm looking for ways to do the same thing, but with even more art. I would love to be able to do storyboards that pop up over the course of the video, right? So it's almost like reading a comic book with frames that appear from time to time, and eventually, if, I retire and all of my investments make me rich, which they won't, but I sure hope they make enough money for me to retire. I'd love to be able to pay or hire an animation team to actually do cool CG, of spaceships flying around, in time with the music. That would be fantastic. So if you work, if you work in, computer generated graphics, if you do game design or things like that, and you're interested in maybe collaborating with me on something like this, I cannot pay you right now, but if you want to do it for fun, I'd love to talk to you. Otherwise, just leave a comment and I'll add you to my Rolodex. And one day, if I come upon a sum of money, maybe I'll be able to hire you to do even more elaborate storytelling. That would be great. I should do a Kickstarter, but honestly, the time involved is interesting. Maybe a limitation. Hey, thanks very much for watching. It's Saturday morning, and I'm going to sort of crank this video out with minimal editing before lunch. Put it out. Hopefully you guys will consume it and enjoy it. Again, you have been watching Synth Seeker, and enjoy the ride, and talk to you later. Have a great day.